Welcome back. This is episode 12. And today we're going to finish off the unit frames. We've already gone through the player target, target of target, and focus frame. And then we've also done the party and raid frames. Uh, Raid pet frames, I wouldn't recommend using them, but you can set it up the same way as you would anything else. Here's all of the information that you can change. And then target frame I don't use, but setup is the same. You just change all of the settings right here in the drop down. What I do want to focus on today is mainly going to be like arena, boss, and then your tank frames, and then your bodyguards. But it's going to be real quick because a lot of them are the same. Now, as far as the pet frame, I'm not going to go over that right now. I'm going to switch over to my hunter so you can actually see a pet and you'll be able to understand how that's set up. Okay, so boss frame. Boss frames are used, as you can see, they're right here, and they're used in engagements, raids, dungeons, and the boss will show up, and you can determine how you want them to grow and different information that you see on them. So in the boss frames, first you have to, of course, enable them. And then you decide all of the rest of the settings that you want. Now, uh, um, here is a sample of frames on the side. So if you had 5 bosses, this is what it would look like. I'd like to leave the health standard for everything as everything else, and I leave it on the left. Um, but the one thing that I like to see is I like to see percent. So as you can see from the tooltip on the side, how you do that is you go current, and that's it. Of course, I've entered something wrong. Let me just take a quick look. Ah, got to have a T at the end of current. There we go. So as you can see, it's still set for the amount of health, but when he starts losing health, you're going to see the percentage over here, and then you have the power. I would leave the power on there because some of the bosses react when they hit 100% power. Then they do a certain spell that would be something that would be good for you to see. Um, and there's your power. And if you want percent instead of number, then you can put percent. I usually leave this one as is. There's no problem with it being that way. The names I leave at medium so I can see exactly which one it is that I'm targeting. And oh, by the way, these are all clickable. So if you need to switch targets, you can just click on this one or this one, and it will target that individual. Um, but the names are similar to change with the rest of them. You can make it short, very short, long, whatever you want to set it as. And then where do you want it to line up? So if maybe you're going to put the health at the top left, maybe you put this at the bottom left. It just depends on how you want to look at it. Portrait, I don't normally enable. I don't need to see a portrait of a boss, and besides that, it takes more graphics, so I don't even bother. Buffs and debuffs. What I usually do is I'll leave them off to the side. As you can see, the buffs are enabled. There's 3, and there's 1 row. Oversize is 22, and then the offsets, XY offsets have come preset. I leave the font size the same because it doesn't need to be really, really that big. And then if you want, you can make them click through. And then this is time remaining, and then they'll go in descending order. And then you can blacklist or block any certain one at any particular time. Debuffs are the same way, they're enabled, and everything else is pretty much the same, and you can change it as you see fit. Cast bar is a good thing to have because then if he's casting something that you want to interrupt, then you can see that they're casting it, switch, and uh, maybe interrupt that cast. Now, I did just check latency, which would mean that what latency does, and I failed to explain this before, is it puts that little red line on the cast bar. If it reaches that red line, based on your latency, it cannot be interrupted. Anything before that can be interrupted. All right, so as I said, information panel is not used. And then also, I enable the raid icon. So if your raid lead wants you to hit this one, for example, maybe he puts a skull on this one. So if I was to target myself and say, okay, because it uses you as a reference. Um, yeah, it doesn't do it, but um, what it would do is it would put your raid icon right here. So if you put a skull, if your raid lead put a skull on there, then it would show up over here, which is what you really want to do. So this is a good position for me. This is usually where I leave my boss frame. So that's done. The only other thing we have to do for this now is this is our rate. This is our um, arena frame. And what I like to do is I like to keep it right over here where the boss frame is, because you're not going to have a boss frame normally and an arena frame. Um, and to be honest, I don't PvP that much, and I definitely don't do arenas, but this is helpful to have up. I do watch a lot of the podcast or the cast, the guys that post on YouTube or Twitch. I watch them, and I see their raid frames up, and I see the way some of them mark, and they are, you know, very similar to what you could see here. You want to make sure that the PvP trinket is showing. Um, Good idea to know when the PvP trinket is up or if it's been used. And then the rest of the information, just like anything else that we've set up, you can set in here. Okay. It's actually really easy to set up. Once you've set up a unit frame, most of the information in the rest of the unit frames are the same. All right, so that's arena frames. We did arena frames, we did boss frames. Now, assist frames. Now, the bad part about this right now is that I can't see it. You can't tell what it's going to look like unless you go toggle. There's your assist. That's main assist and main, and there's your tank frame. So if you have two tanks, they're both designated as tanks, but one's not assist, they'll show up in this one, not this one. So this is where I usually keep my tank frames. It's out of the way over to the side, and my tanks will show up in my raid frames down here as well. Let's move this here because we're going to use this in a little bit. Okay, so again, you can set buffs, debuffs. So buffs and debuffs are not enabled, but buff indicator is enabled. And then you can go in and you can configure the different auras as well if you want. We're not going to do that. That takes you down into the filters. I'm going to leave it as what is default for ElvUI. And then the tank frame is going to be exactly the same way. Enable it. You're going to enable a tank frame. Buffs are not shown. Debuffs are not shown. And excuse me, buff indicator is shown, and also debuffs are shown. Now the difference is that we do want to change the font, because I do like to have the same font as I normally do. I usually keep all my fonts the same, and those are set the same, and that's it. That's your raid frame, or that's your tank frame. Now your bodyguard frame. If you have a bodyguard out, if you've made it to Mr. Pandaria, or correction, Warlords of Draenor, and you have a bodyguard that you run with you, what I usually do is I keep him off to the side over here. And you won't see him unless you actually have a bodyguard out. So I'm just adjusting this to where the rest of this is set up, just to make sure that I'm straight. And it looks pretty straight. But the bodyguard frame, you can see there's not much to set up. Really, there's not. You can do focus on, focus off if you want. I usually leave everything the same. I just move it to where I want it, which is right off to the side over here. You'll see a little unit frame, smaller than this one right here. And that is your bodyguard frame. Nothing to set up really. Now the only thing we have left is a pet frame. So what I'm going to do is, because you don't see a pet on this guy, I'm going to go over to my hunter and I will summon a pet. And then we'll go from there. So here we go. Now I've switched over to Beast Mastery, so I could pull Gara out. And what I've done is, you can see where my pet frame is right here, and this is the pet command bar. So if you look at the pet frame here on my unit frames, you can see how I've set these up. Now, really, the only thing that I've done is, number one, you enable it. Number two is I changed the size of it. And I just stacked it right up underneath my unit frame. And then here is my my action bar, which is my pet bar right here. And as you can see, this shows or hides during pet battles. And you can actually change the number of buttons that you have here as well. You can have 10 per row, 10 buttons. Button size is 30. A little bit smaller than these. I don't use them very frequently. If I'm going to use them, I usually, for example, this is a macro that I set up. And as you can see, there's a macro here for when I have my core hound out, if my raid team doesn't have hero. So this is how the pet bar is set up, or the pet frame is set up. So first of all, I enabled it. I do a range check on it. I do heal predictions on it, so I can see how much healing he's getting. Do I need to heal him? And then I put threat display mode, and I put glow. Okay. The rest of this is default. Health bar, I don't put a health text on there. I usually just watch the bar itself for his health. You can decide where you want to attach the health to if you're going to use it. And these are your text offsets and your positioning. And this is just like everything else. You can watch your pet's power bar. You can take it off if you want. Gone. To me, it doesn't matter my pet's power. It's going to regenerate. I just leave it there, just for informational purposes. You can decide your style: filled, insert, space, inset. Excuse me. And what inset does is, and this is actually fairly new, it insets it to the unit frame itself. So we're going to set that one inset. That's a change that they did, and I'm gonna use that one. And then the name. As you can see, I have the name centered. It's set for medium name. It's a 4-letter name anyway, so it's going to all show up. Even if I was to use very short. Portrait, I don't normally look at. I don't need it. Buff indicator is enabled, although I don't really use it a whole lot. And then buffs are not enabled. I don't want them to show up. And then debuffs are the same way. Cast bar is enabled, but I really don't use it that much. So the other thing I like to do is, like I said, I like to set latency. Okay. And then information panel, as I stated, I don't use it. That's the bottom line for a pet. It's just like all the rest of the frames. So we are back at our paladin, and I think that about covers the unit frames. As I stated, you can set up your pet target frame. You could set that over to the side if you wanted to, maybe. And the rest of the unit frames I don't use. And that gets us close to the end. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the next one is going to be miscellaneous, just certain things that might be useful that really isn't in here that you could use. And then I'm going to give you a quick example of what it looks like to actually run the UI with a fully built character. Once again, if you have any comments, please leave them down below. And let me know what you think. I do have some plans for other add-ons, and I hopefully you've enjoyed this. So I'll see you later. See you on the next episode.